I want to challenge people's notion that you need this kind of random collection of professors and social experience that isn't necessarily what each individual person needs to grow and mature.
You're right that society kind of sometimes views college as kind of like a one size fits all. You go to college, you do well, you get a job, live happily ever after. I
Mhm.
think, yeah, I think in many ways that's a very detrimental mindset when it comes to college.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to another dialogue through thoughts and feelings. I'm here today with Celia, and the discussion that we're having today is my opinion that college is overrated and isn't for everybody. I come from this point of view. Celia comes from a different point of view, and we're going to work it out and hopefully learn something today. So, welcome, Celia.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. So, I think it would be helpful if you start with just like a minute or two about yourself and the way you were raised, and maybe contextualize how you got to your opinion about college.
Yeah, definitely. So I am 26 years old. I come from a family that is all for the most part college educated. My grandpa was a professor at Yale and then became the chairman of the zoology department at the University of Washington. So academics kind of like breathes in my family. I got my bachelor's of science in neuroscience and my bachelor's of public health or Bachelor of Arts in Public Health. And yeah, I grew up as an only child. I grew up with just me and my mom. We grew up in an area a little bit north of Seattle, Washington. Um, and yeah, that's a bit about me. I love talking about various topics and hearing other people's opinions and seeing what we can learn about each other. I did a lot of that in college, so like doing that.
Oh, that's wonderful. And that's really interesting background. I had no idea coming into this conversation um, any of that, and for the viewers who don't know, we haven't met before. We've had like a 2 minute pre-call. So all this I'm learning at the same time as you. So I'll do a minute or two on myself. I'm 39 years old. I'm married, have a son that's 2.5 years old, and we live in Berkeley, California. And I was raised in Long Island, New York, and in the middle of three boys in a pretty traditional Jewish family. The parents are divorced, but there is really, really strong emphasis on education. And it was, I would almost say, fetishized this notion of going to an Ivy League school. And there wasn't even a thought in the world of not going to college. That would be complete failure. And, the grandparents would be ashamed. And I think probably the highest good in the minds of my parents and grandparents was for me to become a doctor or a lawyer, possibly something like a scientist or a business person, although nobody really knew exactly what that meant. Um, and yeah, so that's the environment that I was brought up in. And today I'm the CEO of a marketing company, and I've had a number of startups when I was in my 20s, and now I've run this company for 11 years. So that's where I am professionally. And do you mind sharing what you do professionally? I think that could be helpful for this conversation as well.
Yeah, definitely. So I'm a research clinician at the University of Washington in the
Mhm.
Department of Anesthesiology and Pain Medicine.
Hmm.
So that's what I'm doing right now, and I plan on applying to medical school really soon.
Wow. Okay. So I think this sets the stage very, very nicely because you come from education. I'm so struck by the fact that you say your grandfather went to Yale.
He taught at Yale.
He taught at Yale. That's just uh, I just feel like if somebody teaches at or went to one of the top universities in the world that long ago, it seems to create a legacy of really bright people and high expectations too, and that's pretty striking. Because yeah, because my family, basically everybody went to Queens College. That's kind of the Long Island way. Um, So you come from education, so it is deeply embedded, I think, in the culture that you were brought up in. So I guess if that's true, can you tell me more about what the expectations are around education?
Yeah, definitely. I just want to point something out. So I grew up with just my mom, and my mom is from uh, the East Coast. She's from New York. Same with my family, and there, my mom's family, they're all Jewish, and so
Oh,
yeah, which a lot of people can't tell because of the way I look.
mhm.
But yeah, and so I totally know what you mean about like it's very cultural
Huh.
as like Jewish people to like want your children to be really successful academically and career wise. And so I think um, because of that, kind of similarly, my family, yeah, the same thing is that it was never a question of whether or not you went to college. It was what college do you plan to go to? Um,
Yes. Okay. So my people, and
yeah,
they are your people too. Yeah.
yes, a lot of pressure. So yeah. Sorry, can you, I just went off on a tangent. Can you repeat your question?
Yeah. What were the expectations that you had growing up about education? I mean, you just stated what I think was part of your upbringing too, which is what college. But, um, like for instance, would you feel like you'd be in good standing in your family if you went to a local state college or something?
Um, yeah, that's a good question. I think my family would be okay with it because I think because my grandpa was so strict about academics, I think some family members kind of felt that pressure and the anxiety their entire life, and they wanted to try their best to not, pass that down as like a family pathology onto their children.
Hmm.
But I do think if I did go to maybe like a community college, I think my family would kind of question um, where my values were at. I think they expect very highly of me, and so if I don't perform well academically, I think that would be very concerning to them, and I think it would be a big deal in my family. I mean, for example, my cousin, he majored in honors electrical engineering, did really well, and then kind of had like a quarter life crisis at one point, and he quit his job for a really great company that was paying him a lot, and he decided to move out of town to the small town, and to work in a pizza shop, and he's been there ever since, and it's been years, and that's
Oh,
definitely been an issue in my family, and I can tell there's a lot of resentment towards him and his choices, and a lot of disappointment within my family.
hmm.
I can tell that even though my family isn't uh, vocal about it, I can tell that it's very embarrassing for them, especially because my aunt and uncle tried their best to give their sons the best education possible. My cousins were in this program. It's like the highly capable program
Hmm.
for young kids.
Yeah.
So when they went to elementary school, they're in the highly capable program. They all tried to test into Lakeside, which is private school in Seattle. It's the same school that Bill Gates went to for high
Ah,
school.
okay.
So it was very disappointing in my family, and I can tell there's some deep rooted um, just animosity because of it. So
Hmm.
I think had I gone that route, I think my family would have been disappointed, and I think my family tries to act loving and supportive of whatever we do in our lives, but I do think deep down inside my family would wonder like, where's her head at? What's she doing with her life?
Hmm. And
And
just to bring up something that has been part of the culture for a number of decades as an idea floating around, but if happiness is the highest good, it shouldn't matter. I'm just kind of bringing up almost a cliched thing to say, but it's interesting to contrast that with the idea that you would be viewed as a failure if you were happy working at a pizza shop, even though you had proven that you're intelligent, got into a great program, was in a gifted program. Um, but clearly in your family's culture, happiness is not the only factor, nor does it need to be. I don't think happiness is the end goal of life either. But um, I don't know. Is that interesting to you? The idea of where happiness stands and the ultimate objectives when your parents look at and your extended family look at their kids?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, I think my family does really want everyone to be happy.
Hmm.
And I think they do value that. But I think again, it's like a family pathology passed down through the years. My great grandma Celia, I was named after her.
Oh,
She
wow.
immigrated here from like Poland, Russia area, and she came here with essentially no education. She was really young. She worked really hard. She was kind of a badass.
Wow.
And the one thing that led her to having a very successful life, and at the time the only means by having some level of socioeconomic um, I guess vertical mobility was through education. And so I think because of that, I think and that did bring her a lot of happiness, because obviously if you're an immigrant, it's really hard to be in the US, especially a while ago, like in the early 1900s. And so I think because of that, I think my family associates some level of education with happiness because it brings you a good life. It helps you live the American dream of being able to afford having a fair amount of children, like a Jewish family, typical
Hmm.
Jewish family,
Hmm.
and then also having some level of social mobility and kind of being able to blend in and assimilate with American culture. So yeah, I think because of that, it is passed, it's a familial pathology passed down in my family. And so I think we do tend to associate happiness with academics. And I think looking back, my grandpa was the family has always been a patriarchal like household family. And so I think because of that, I mean, I'm just looking back at when I was a little girl. I only have two memories of my grandpa. One, I came home to their house one day and I showed them my report card. And back in the day, when I was a little girl, we were graded on like a scale of like 1 to 4. And I had all fours. And then I had a 3 in reading, I remember. And my grandpa didn't even acknowledge the fours. He just went straight towards the 3 and said, "What happened there?" And I
Hmm.
was really young. I was like 7 or 8. And I just remember he just didn't even acknowledge my success. He focused on my failure. And I remember around the age, he also gave me as a, I think it was like a Hanukkah present. He gave me like the Harry Potter books, which you don't give like a 6, 7 year old. Like it's like he doesn't think. And I think because of that, I think a lot of members of my family, that sort of mindset was passed down. And I think yeah, I mean, even one of my cousins who had really bad ADHD in school and wasn't doing well, my uncle literally threatened to sit in his class with him to make him pay attention so he could pass. So it's, yeah.
Wow. I'm taking in what you're saying, and I was impacted by this side comment, seemingly that you made, that he doesn't think uh, such an educated man. I don't know anyone whose grandparent taught at Yale, so that's just one point about him. But and then you say he doesn't think, and then you give evidence that he didn't think about your emotions and the impact it would have on somebody who is young and wants people who are the authorities in her life and family to be proud of her, the impact that he would have. I agree. I don't. It didn't seem like he either thought or was able to think on that level, um, and which is interesting because you can have academic intelligence, but it doesn't mean that you're using your social emotional intelligence. And forgive me for making connections that may not be there, but you also used the word pathological to describe your extended family or larger family's view on education. So I'm associating that with the notion of he didn't think. And yeah, I'm just curious about where that leaves you because I'm coming into this dialogue feeling like you're quite pro college. I mean, that is your stance. But
Yes.
I'm seeing something else revealed in sort of in the shade, not in the light, but in the other part of what you're saying. Am I onto anything there or
Yeah,
it's
you definitely are. Yeah, I think my reason for believing I for being very pro college, I think it's in a way it's very anti-family. I think my family has always viewed college as where you get educated, and then you get educated, and therefore you have high paying job, therefore you have social mobility and vertical mobility, and you are like your family should be proud of you. We have our name can be passed on with upstanding legacy. But for me, it's interesting because I think college is important, not just for education, but for me, I think it's really important for your overall happiness and learning to kind of be a contributing member of society.
hmm,
And I think I have a very different opinion from the rest of my family. I think my family has always viewed college as either kind of like this necessary evil that my grandpa was like, he was like, you must go to college, get an education, turn out like me.
mhm,
Um, but I viewed it as something that is almost like a free choice. Like I choose to be not only educated, but I choose to be around like-minded people who have similar values, who want to learn a bit more about each other. I think it's really important. I grew up in a not so diverse area. I may be from Seattle, but where I grew up, it's a fairly upper middle class, predominantly white Asian area. Lots of my friends' parents were doctors, and so I grew up in um, in a very homogenous community. And it's always been important for me to go off to college and be around people who might have different backgrounds than I am, so I can learn more about people um, and different opinions, just like today, because I think that's really valuable, and that's something that I don't think my family did the best of growing up. And
hmm.
so for me, college wasn't just an academic like choice; it was very much a social choice, and that's something that is very different from the rest of my family.
Yeah.
Yeah, and my grandpa, he was like, honestly, all his siblings, so my mom and all her siblings, they hated my grandpa. They view education, I think, negatively because of that, but they all got their education. Like my one of my aunts, she's a college professor, so really followed in his footsteps. I think my family saw the benefits of education. My grandpa and my grandma, they were like pretty poor when they were younger, but they were able to afford a really nice house that isn't in the family anymore because no one can pay the property taxes. It's like $1 million. And they had a sailboat, and he was really well known in the academic community. Even to this day, sometimes people will see my last name and say, "Oh, are you related to Aubrey?" Because
Hmm.
he was my favorite professor. He was considered one of the founding fathers of comparative endocrinology. So academia is really important in my family,
Hmm.
but I don't think it's important for the right reasons. I don't think prestige or money. I don't think that's what life is all about. And I wish
Wow.
that, yeah. So
Um,
yeah, deep stuff.
yeah. No, I'm struck by what a rebel you are, and I coming into the conversation honestly, just hearing your opinion. I disagree with your notion. Is basically what you said that college is overrated. I think it's very important. And then I learn about your academically prestigious grandfather, and I did not think of you as a rebel. I assumed that there was a traditionalism that you were participating in. And now I'm learning that your view of college has very little to do with your grandparents and perhaps great grandparents' view. So that is very interesting. What I hear you saying is that you see it as a, sort of like a socialization in exposure to different points of view, different types of people, in order to make one a more contributing member of society, which I'm guessing is one of the highest goods to you. Perhaps you have some collect you have some feeling of the importance of the collective, what is good for all of us versus the individual. Um, and I relate to that, and that's what I'm hearing. But yeah, that's really rebellious. And I'm also hearing, I'm guessing actually, that what your grandparents weren't doing, or what your grandparents weren't doing, was understanding that your generation is in a very different place. You grew up in what sounds like just an incredibly safe place and neighborhood, and you had money and you had what you needed, and your great grandparents probably didn't, emigrating from Poland, Russia, and for them to have money and economic security was probably like a dream, and academic prestige. I mean, this really was the right thing. But for you, it's more about meaning and I don't know, self-actualization, or something greater than yourself, which I personally think is a more evolved way of viewing the world, that it was more survival oriented when you just needed to make sure you had meals on the table, and maybe a little bit more than that. It was probably thrilling to have a sailboat. It was probably thrilling to be well known,
Right.
and enticing for you guys maybe as kids to say, wow, what a big deal. This family member of mine was, but what you need is different.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you nailed it. I do think that it's definitely a generational thing. I think, especially in terms of immigration, it is. I think a lot of it might have to do, which I'm sure you can relate to, Judaism. I think Jewish people tend to, they get a bad rep in many ways. And
Hmm.
I think a lot of it was a way of doing as well as they could to prevent anyone from ever, I guess, making fun of them because they're Jewish or they're different. And I think
Hmm.
if you hold a very prestigious position, you have a lot more authority, and I think that had a lot to do with it. Yeah, I think for me, if I have kids someday, not anytime soon, college is extremely important, but I think it's different. It's not to like go so you get an education and you do well in life and you must do it to make the family proud. Because I think in many ways my grandpa would be embarrassed if I didn't go to college. But for me, I think it's part of contributing to a bigger meaning. I think it's important that we live on a planet and we kind of have to pay rent. And I think a big part of that is um, learning about other people's opinions, kind of finding your passion, and then contributing to the rest of the world in that way. And I think for me, I would want my kids to go to college. I don't care what they major in. They can major in, my mom majored in Japanese literature. Like, that's not the most practical thing, but I would want my kids to study something they're passionate about. But I want them to go to college because, at least for me, it taught me the importance of having a diverse opinion, being around diverse people. It taught me the importance of volunteering, and the importance of, I think, just learning to like work like on a deadline, but not just that, but working with groups of people. A lot of the time, if you just go straight from high school into work, you're around people who you might be very similar to in terms of like what you want to do in life. And I think it's important to branch out. And I think
Hmm.
college is a great place to do that. I'm not being the most articulate right now,
No, no,
but
no. I think you're making some really good points that I may have heard in bits and pieces over the years, but never in such a clear, condensed way that this is the reason for college. So, if you don't mind, let me give you my opinion, lay it out for you. And now we have your point of view. And then I guess I want to see where that brings us. So, I'll start with the fact that there's a lot of talk when you have a child amongst, I guess, people in upper middle class or upper class kind of circles. What are you doing for college? Have you thought about that? You know, that sort of thing. And my immediate reaction is, um, I want to prepare in case he wants to go to college. But honestly, I kind of hope he doesn't go to college. Now, why do I say that? It's because I'm a contrarian person. I'm rebellious by nature. I like thinking independently. It makes me feel freer, and freedom is a strong value of mine. Intellectual freedom. Um, so now I don't say that hoping that if he wants to go to college, he's not able to or something. Of course not. Whatever he wants to do, truly anything that's not going to hurt him, I'd be happy with. But the reason I say that is because I think that college is currently too big for its britches. It is meant as this cure-all that that makes you eligible to be a citizen in good standing and a working person. Now, in some cases, in your case, actually, when degrees are needed to be a clinician, needed to be a doctor, if you end up being a doctor, versus some other medical thing that could come from medical school. I don't know what that would be, but it's needed. But I'm an entrepreneur. I didn't need to go to college. I went to an Ivy League school, but I always secretly hoped I would drop out so I could say I didn't graduate college. And it's because I want to challenge people's notion that you need this kind of random collection of professors and social experience that isn't necessarily what each individual person needs to grow and mature, and calling that what's going to prepare you for life. I mean, my greatest preparation for life did not come in college. And I say that with the awareness that that's my problem. Actually, it'd be much better if I did get better preparation for life in college. But it came from being out in the world and from working. I mean, I learned everything that I need to become a successful adult in the working world through trial and error and failure. Um, so that's where I learned it. And then in my relationships with my partners, and ultimately with my wife, and then in my therapy. So this has been my college or the school of life for me, is these experiences. And I say to myself, who decided that this one institution called college, which can vary enormously from institution to institution, should be the gate through which everyone must pass in order to be societally acceptable? Let me pause there. See what you think about that.
yeah, you bring up some really good points. I think the main one that kind of resonates in me is that I think you're right that society kind of sometimes views college as kind of like a one size fits all. You go to college, you do well, you get a job, live happily ever after. I
Hmm.
think, yeah, I think in many ways that's a very detrimental mindset when it comes to college. I think, yeah, I agree that all colleges are different and they all do have different agendas. I think I think view college as like kind of like you're supposed to learn ways in which you can be a functioning member of society. Um, but unfortunately, you're right. Colleges don't all do that. I mean, I don't you don't take any classes. I mean, you might if you're like doing accounting, but like for the most part, you don't take classes on how to I don't know, buy a house. You
Mhm,
don't have any classes on how to like be a good partner,
mhm.
which are all things I've had to learn on my own that have nothing to do with going to college. But I think the bigger issue is that colleges there's no standardization, and I think because of that, you do run into issues. I mean, I actually transferred colleges. So I originally went to a fairly prestigious private college, and then I transferred over to like a state school. It's still a very good state school, and so I've seen kind of both sides of what college can be. And I think the fact that it's not standardized, but people go in thinking, okay, well, I'm here for the same thing. I think that's a very unhealthy mindset. I hope I'm making sense.
You are.
But yeah, I agree that I think a lot of people think that college is just for a single reason, and colleges aren't doing a good job of that. I mean,
Yeah.
just because you go to college doesn't ensure you're going to get a job. Um, but I do still think it's important um, for diversity of thought. That's kind of my main,
Yeah.
yeah.
I like that a lot. When I hear that, I feel strong feelings of I agree, the diversity of thought. But then I think about the problem with it, which is when you have people that are essentially distracted or they have trauma or difficulties in their background, of which I was one in college. I've come a long way towards knowing myself and being a functioning member of society since college. But I think there are a lot of people like me who wouldn't be able to access that diversity of thought and come in with confused ideas. I mean, I felt that college was a place to either get good grades so I could get into a good law school or medical school and then be successful and make a lot of money. It was either that or a place to chase girls and have college experiences. And I was basically trying to get the best grades I could, date girls and party. And the idea of accessing ideas and altering my perspective and gaining new perspectives through the diversity of thought available to me by all these different people from different backgrounds, how I wish I was on that page. And often kind of fantasize that there would be a college experience available to people like me at my age and stage in life because I'm so ready for college right now. I miss intellectual rigor and I try to engage with it as much as I can. And a college atmosphere would be wonderful if it worked with a practical life. It's not like it would be easy to do with most people's day to day life when you get into your late 30s. But what I'm saying is that I love your notion, and perhaps I did pick up a bunch of it there, but my head wasn't in the game, and I needed something. I needed a different type of education, and perhaps you could say that just kind of sucks for you, and hopefully there's not as many people out there like you. But it sounds like you came into college with such a greater maturity than I did that you were ready for the type of experience that you would hope all people would have, where you accessed a diversity of ideas and learn about different people.
Yeah, yeah, you bring up good points. I think the majority of people do just go into college and like must get job, get good grades, and then date and party and have fun and have that like typical college experience. And I think that's definitely where I think society and kind of education prior to college kind of fails us. I think no one ever talks about college being kind of like mind blowing for, again, like diversity of thought, meaning all types of people. I think what we think when we think of college, we think, okay, partying, living away from home,
Right.
trying to get into law school or like veterinary school or something like that. I think the issue with that is that when people do go into college, they go in very closed-minded anyway. Like if that's the experience that they are told that they're going to have, they're not going to seek out trying to like stimulate their mind in terms of like learning other people's opinions. And I think I'm really lucky in the sense that I went in thinking like that, and that was only because I come from an educated family, and luckily my mom did a ton of research on colleges. Again, like I'm extremely privileged. I'm very aware of that. My mom had time um to do that. You know, some people's parents are, working like, blue collar workers, for example. They're just working, and so they have
Mhm.
to do their own research. And so I'm very aware that I was lucky enough, but luckily my mom learned that there are different types of colleges. Of course, there are schools that are like very much designed to kind of, like churn out like computer programmers or something like that. But my mom learned that there are colleges that are private called liberal arts colleges where you have a very liberal education that every single class you take has kind of an interdisciplinary focus. And so even if you take like a chemistry class, you're still going to have seminars and conversations with your fellow students. You'll talk about maybe why chemistry has predominantly been a male, like it has been like a male dominated field. And you'll talk about the implications of that and various experiments. And I was lucky enough to originally go to a college that focused on that, but I'm fully aware that that's not real life. And I think because there's no standardization, I think college can very well be fairly detrimental to people. I think it can cause, I mean, a lot of people just go to college, party, have fun, and then they leave and they get a job that they didn't really even need a college education for. So
Mhm.
I, yeah, I know what you mean about kind of going to college thinking, you're there for good grades and then you want to date people. I think, yeah, again, I think that's what we're told in high school. That's what we're told growing up. And I don't see why anyone would ever want to think differently because it makes sense.
I like what you're saying, and then one thing you said confused me a bit, which is you said that you had the privilege of going into college with the right mentality, that you were there to access different points of view and perhaps, grow as a human being, as an intellectual, whatever it may be. And you said it's because you come from an educated family, but an educated family wouldn't necessarily teach you that. I mean, I did too. I come from an educated family, not as educated as yours, perhaps. But uh, if I had to take a leap, I would say that your mom is a little bit aligned with you and helped to infuse you with some of those values that helped you go into college in a healthy way. And so what you're making me think about is the role of parenting in developing people that essentially have your point of view. I love your point of view. I think that
Thank you.
I think it's the healthy one to go in, and I'm just more concerned about people that go in like I did, and like so many people do. And I'm not talking about it as a function of economic privilege, although that's clearly there, as we both know. But it's almost like a function of parenting privilege, or privilege in being raised where you have enough attention paid to you, and someone is helping you figure out what you want, and you have the time and space to wonder about what you'll be interested in, and how you want to impact the world one day. Like that was not a concept to me until the last 10 years. It sounds like it was. And tell me if I'm imputing something on you that's not there, but it sounds like it was a concept when you were a teenager or going into college.
Yeah, it definitely was a concept. And I think I say it has to do with education because so my grandpa every few years he would go on sabbatical, which you get the privilege of when you're highly educated and you're a professor. And
Mhm.
so every few years he would move his family to a different country. And so I think because of that, diversity of thought as well as culture has just always been a value in my family. My family very much values travel and learning about other people's cultures. And I think because of that, I think it's always been kind of at I don't know. It's always been just like at the forefront of my family's values, and I think that was very much in my mom's head when it came to looking at colleges for me. I didn't do a lot of the college like research. My mom did it, and it's because she knows a lot about colleges because she's from an academic family, and she was privileged enough to be able to have the time to do the research because she has a good job and everything. And so I think that's where education came in. And I think because my family's educated, they knew what to look for in a college. And I think a lot of families who maybe not have experienced college themselves, they just think, oh, okay, go to state school or like a community college. They think more about college in terms of finances and as a means to kind of just roll out workers in the world. Whereas my mom knew that college can be more important than that.
Mhm.
And yeah, again, I think about I'm just like it all has to do with privilege and my family's privilege because they have good jobs because they have an education. So
And it sounds like someone has taught, at least I'm hearing about your mom, taught your mom how to parent, how to think, something along those lines. Because it's not, when people say education, they're often just talking about having degrees. But I don't know if you mean it that way, but I think of true education as people have a well-rounded view on how to interact with human beings, how to invent, create, think through difficult situations, and manage their way um, through the world, which always throws tough things at you. And so there must have been some of that in your mom, and then I would give you plenty of credit as well for the characteristics you were born with and the way that you developed. But, you've mentioned privilege a bunch of times. And what it makes me think about is just we need to get more people to a place of privilege, essentially. We need to get more people to be able to just figure out what they want. Because I think if you just leave millions of people in a situation where their basic needs are met, and they have the opportunity to say, what do I really want? Because it may be working in a pizza shop, and it may be being a scientist, and it may be, just anything. That's how I think you get the type of progress that has led us to the place that we are in a positive sense, where there is so much technological medical advancements, and um, there's a higher standard of living for most people in the world, generally speaking. So it almost seems like our conversation is adjacent to, or is within a much larger conversation that has to do with how we can move generations to the point where kids have the privilege, the luxury of thinking about the most positive way they can impact the world and the way that they can realize what matters to them. I do think the best comes from that, and that's a American point of view, but that's the one I hold.
no, I agree with that. I think yeah, I think you kind of touching on the fact that college, it's good in that you want kind of like a higher place in society so you can, so we're all kind how do I articulate this? Um I think now that I think about it, I think hearing what you're saying is I think I might change my viewpoint a bit.
Mhm.
I think that for me, I think why I'm very pro college is because I am fully aware that, as you said, you need college in order to do some sorts of careers, like be a doctor, be a lawyer. And I would hope that they went to college. Um, and I think the reason I think after hearing you say that, I think for me, I think rather than being kind of like pro college, I think I'm very much pro college for, especially, and again this comes from my from learning college, especially for people of color, people who come from a lower socioeconomic status, because unfortunately, just like my grandpa, that is sometimes the only way that you can have some sort of vertical mobility in society. I think that if I think going to college, like for me as a person of color, I think we need more diversity of thought in careers, like being like a lawyer or like a politician, or being a doctor, and having research that's more focused on values and cultures that might not just be the typical like white American culture. And I think that's why I think for me college is really important. It's so society becomes diverse with thoughts like ours. And I think in a way, I think in many ways college is the only way to do that for some people. Does that make sense? I feel like I was just kind of all over the place with
No,
that.
no, no. I don't think you were, but you brought up concepts that are so big that it's taking me a second to make sure that I have a handle on them. But I believe what you just said is that if people who haven't had as many advantages, for people that haven't had as many advantages, college can be an entryway to enjoy some of the privileges of the majority, or whatever you would call it, because it's like everybody gets assimilated into a group that kind of speaks the same language, has some common experiences, common learnings, and so it may make for a society that gives more equal access to all types of people.
Yeah, that's kind of part of what I'm saying, but I think it's important that we kind of I think education can kind of bring everyone up to the same level. I think
Mhm.
education just brings about so many other things, like people who are college educated tend to be happier, they tend to volunteer more. My dog is here, sorry.
Mhm.
um and so I think because of that, I think it's important to have everyone go to college, because gosh, it's so hard to, I'm thinking about what you're saying, and like what you're saying I agree with, but I'm like also trying to like explain myself.
Yeah, yeah.
uh, I think especially for people of color, people who come from a lower economic status, I think it's important to go to college, because if they kind of become part of like upper socioeconomic class, they can instill the values they've learned from education and upwards mobility onto their children. And then eventually we'll have like a long line of people who might, for example, originally start as like immigrants, or people who didn't really think much about education or value it, and their children and their children's children all become educated, and therefore they can contribute to society in a way. I think for me, I think it's like a person of color thing. I think it's important for people of color and people of lower socioeconomic status to go to college, to have diverse thought, and to contribute into like the workforce, because I think we need more people like that. So we have a more diverse society. I guess the way I'm trying to explain it is that the majority of people who go to college, especially Ivy League schools, are white, affluent people who, I mean, I'm going to be honest, like years and years and years ago, their ancestors were probably slave owners. And, it's just kind of this like old money that just continues to be passed down. And with that, you don't have much diversity within the real world, the workforce. I mean, the majority of our doctors are white males, and that's just kind of how it's always been. And so I think people who, might not have had much of an opportunity to even have college as a reality, who might now have it, who had the ability to go to college, I think it's important that they um, kind of transcend their barriers and they can be right up with the people who have always been privileged. So then we can have more diversity of thought. Am I making any sense?
You are making sense. Yes. I think I partially agree with you. I do believe that college is an entrance into the mainstream in a way, unless it's you're just going to, let's say, an average college that's not going to mean much to an employer, but it certainly at least gives you an experience like many other experiences. So let's say your parents didn't go to college, it would certainly be a way of entering the majority world and not being in the lower stratum of society, where you don't have much mobility. It does offer some mobility. However, I do think that my experience going. So I went to Columbia, and I went to Columbia in the late '90s to early 2000s, and there was tremendous diversity of skin color and gender there, and I think that was uh, important to Columbia as it is today. Um, and there definitely was exactly the feeling that you're saying amongst the people I talked to that hadn't had much privilege and their parents hadn't been to college. They definitely felt that way. That this was them breaking a multi generational cycle of not having as much opportunity and being able to use their intelligence and what they were born with, their ability, their drive, in order to make a good life for themselves. So I love that. I love that opportunity. I guess where I'm finding what I think is a point of difference is that if someone is a person of color and they come from a low socioeconomic background, and let's go back to the pizza shop. They work at a pizza shop, and that's their opportunity, and they make minimum wage. And then one day they work hard and they own the pizza shop, which you could even call a blue collar type of entrepreneurship, if you will. I guess I wouldn't see a problem with that if they didn't go to college. I would say that's great, and they'd have hopefully a good amount of money. And so I guess I don't need college to be in the equation there, but I do see your broader point.
Yeah, I think I guess like if I think about like structural functionalism, I think, everyone in society does serve a purpose and we do need pizza shop workers and we do need pizza shop owners so we can have
Mhm,
our pizza.
mhm.
Um, but I do think if at all possible, I think people should get a college education because I think everyone's like opinion is valuable, and I think that it's hard. And like I love my cousin, but I can't help but think that he has so much more to offer in society. I mean, he's really intelligent, and some of, our next great electrical engineering inventions he could have created. And I can't help but think and I hate to say it, I sound so privileged and like almost snotty when I say this, but I can't help but think he's maybe selling himself a little short. And I think there are people who honestly, college is not a good route for them, and they're okay living a life where they're not constantly being intellectually stimulated. And like we need those people to like run pizza shops and stuff like that. Or you could be
Mhm.
extremely smart and be intellectually stimulated and run pizza shops. But I think at the end of the day, I think everyone should at least try college if they can afford it.
Mhm.
because I think some people might realize there might be more meaning in life. And I think if you go to college, you might kind of learn more about various opportunities, and you have a lot more access to opportunities that maybe even if you still want to you work in a pizza shop after, maybe you could learn in college about, I don't know, like the importance of contributing to society in terms of hunger. And maybe as a pizza shop owner, you could like I don't know, every like once a year, donate some of your food to like a local like food bank or something like that. And I think a lot of that is unfortunately learned in college. You don't, yeah.
Okay, I hear you. I have a few thoughts, and I think this is where it gets very complex. And I also, I also sense that there's something like deeper when you talk about this subject of people not having the opportunity and how important it is, where you really feel for people that perhaps people you relate to, who have been in your family in the past or who have you've been friends with. I'm not sure. There seems to be something deeper that you're feeling when you talk about the subject of people having what I'm almost interpreting to say like a fair opportunity to lead a good life, a contributing life. That's what I'm getting from you, emotionally.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like I always say, like life is all about opportunities, and the more you have, I do believe the happier you can be, the more liberated you feel, the more free you feel.
Mhm,
And I think without going to college, you really limit a lot of your opportunities, not just in like getting a job or you like need a college degree, but college is like they're great because they allow you opportunities. Like say like I wanted to do research on like fish or something like that.
mhm,
There's not much I can do unless I go to college. They can get me in touch with local researchers. They can maybe even pay for me to take a trip to do some like marine biology stuff.
mhm.
I don't know. And I think people who don't go to college, I don't think they realize that they're really limiting um, their opportunities in that sense. And I think, again, I think opportunity is, I think it's not, I don't think in terms of happiness that there's like a causation situation, but I do think they're very much correlated. And this all makes me kind of think of this guy I dated for a while. And he never went to college. Both his parents were really disappointed that I didn't go to college because both of them were first gen to go to college. And it
Mhm.
was hard on them knowing that they didn't pass that down to both their kids didn't go to college. And he currently works as an auto technician. And he lives a very kind of like simple, not so like stimulating life. And he's just an incredible person, and he has so much like love and care for people. And I know that had he gone to college, I'm sure he would have found a subject that he could like really geek out on and be interested in. And I think knowing that he could do that, but he kind of chooses to live this life without furthering his education, I can see how that's really affected his happiness, because he kind of there's you can't go much farther than what he's doing. And I think because of that, he feels very limited. And I think feeling limited is almost kind of, it's been kind of suffocating for him.
Yeah.
I think at the end of the day, I think deep down inside he doesn't think he can do do much better than what he's doing. And I think college gives you the opportunity to, even if you might not be like a master at organic chemistry, you still have that opportunity to learn and maybe have that as an option. um,
Okay, so I'm hearing two things, and I'm going to try to join them from this is how I'm interpreting what you're saying. So one is that both in the character of your cousin and in the character of your ex-boyfriend, these are people that don't fully utilize their potential. And you are connecting it to college. I certainly wouldn't think that you would call it like a one factor type of decision. But I am hearing people that probably lack some degree of motivation because of other things in their mental health, personal histories. There's something there that comes before the decision to not pursue education, which I don't care if pursuing education is what made your ex-boyfriend happy or your cousin happy. If it came from something else, that another form of education that wasn't formal education, if they taught themselves on YouTube how to do things and they went to the library, whatever it is, and then they went out and did something, I think you would agree, because I would definitely say that would be okay too. I
Yeah, I would definitely agree. You put that very well. I would definitely agree. But I think again, like I totally agree with that, but not many people do that because
right.
they're not really kind of pushed to do that. And they're not, I mean, for him to do that, like he would go completely against his norm, or against his friends who don't do any of that. But if you're in college and you're around like-minded people who all kind of have a thirst for learning,
Uh-huh.
you're inspired by those people. And I think in many ways you have some level of drive. Maybe it's just because of grades and you don't want to be kicked out and you're paying a lot of money. I think, and those are obviously terrible reasons to, study. But I think being around people who are also like-minded, I think you can reach your full potential because you feel inspired.
Mhm.
And it's not, I think it takes a lot of, you have to muster up a lot of confidence and courage to kind of go against the norm. And some people that makes them very uncomfortable. And I think if you're around people in college who are all similar in the sense that they all want to get educated, I think it's a lot easier to go get yourself educated. And especially, I mean, you even just learn how to like look things up in a library sometimes, or learn how to use the archives in your institution. I think
Mhm.
if you've never experienced that, I think being able to learn things on YouTube and like kind of figure out what to read, I think it's a lot harder. I think it's more time consuming for people. Um,
Yeah. Um, I like what you're saying there because it seems to be a matter of odds. I think you're saying so many more people would benefit from taking a college route than would be these edge cases you're talking about that are so independently motivated and just whatever they have other influences, they have some sort of inner drive that's been given to them or they were born with that allows them to be self-educated, self-made, build their own alternative life that's sort of outside the norm and the mainstream. Let's just play a game of odds here and not just leave everybody to their own devices and throw college to the wind.
yeah, yeah, I definitely know what you're saying. I think people like that, I think they're kind of similar to maybe people like Mark Zuckerberg, who is like,
Mhm.
screw college, I can do this on my own.
Right.
But those are far and few in between, and I think it's very rare. And I think people like Mark Zuckerberg, like his mindset can be detrimental to people who are like, okay, well then I don't need to go to college, or I don't need to finish college. But again, I think those are isolated situations. And for people
Mhm.
who I know who didn't go to college, everyone I know is not interested in like pursuing like their own, like they're not very self-driven. And I
Right.
um
Yeah, I think you make a great point. And I think I can agree with you that it it is a stepping stone that is important to a lot of people and will allow them a certain quality of life, a certain access to opportunity that is likely to increase both their happiness and their collective contribution. Um, and as we get to the end of the dialogue, I would add I'm intrigued by the notion of all the people that fall between the cracks of this notion. Because I don't know, it could be, 20 million out of 300 50 million or however many people are in the United States, it could be, that are motivated in different ways and need a different type of education. So I would want to make sure that those people have a place to land. And I would reemphasize what we talked about before, which is that there are things that are primary to the moment where you say, I'm going to apply to college and give myself some more opportunity. Things that I think are a bigger part of why somebody would not go to college, drop out, and then lead a life that does not fulfill them as much as they were born to be fulfilled. I would say, because I believe all people are born with the potential for a happy and fulfilling life. Um, so I focus more. One of my great passions is mental health and people being able to be having access to therapy and having access to people that can help them explore what made them who they are today and what blocks them in from seeing um, what would make them happy ultimately or being able to access it all. So I think that that ties closely into this conversation. And so I'm just interested in that, like that current of people that are, so to speak, being washed ashore, not having the type of opportunity. For what it's worth, I have to add that.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, you bring up really great points. I think it's interesting how you went to Columbia, like one of the best schools, and you yourself are like you don't think college is for everyone. I think that's really, really fascinating. I think it's really nice hearing your opinion because every one of my friends is very, very pro college, and I actually am like one of the few people who I think is more like I'm a bit more deviant when it comes to that.
Mhm,
I think everyone should go to college, but I think it's not just for education and to like
mhm,
be a member of society. I think
mm,
college brings a lot of opportunities that I wish we focused on. I wish more people talked about it, like in high school, like go to college because you're going to be around like a ton of different people and you're going to hear all these opinions that you might
mhm.
not have in your like little sheltered neighborhood here.
Yeah,
Um, yeah.
yeah. Well, yeah, I really like that we're a little distance apart, but not as far apart as I thought. And I'm kind of you're in the area of like it's almost like the highest good, the safest bet, something like that, to push people through the doors of college because it's likely to improve a lot about their life and give them access to things they may not have access to and equalize things across the board a little bit more. And I'm kind of more intrigued because of my personal history and my issues and stuff, intrigued by the idea of of an education that gives you access to community, people that can have conversations that are different from the conversations that you are used to having, and a place to genuinely learn whatever it is you're interested in learning about. I can't think of many models that exist like that. College is perhaps the best one we have. My eye is over there looking at that. What could that be? How could we diversify what the word education means? Because education needs to be in the context of community. I agree. It's not just YouTube. It's, if you don't have people to talk it over with, you don't have a proper route to being educated. You need people for that. So I don't think we're very far apart in that. I just happen to be more interested in that because of my background and perhaps I'm a little strong to say, oh, I hope he doesn't go to college. Maybe that's just me trying to get a rise out of someone from my past or something in my personal world. But I think it leads to good discussions like this one. So we're basically at the end of time. Is there anything else that you wanted to say before we close up the dialogue?
No, I just want to thank you so much for having me. This was really interesting, and I agree. I thought we were originally kind of very polarized in our opinions, but I really enjoyed listening to what you had to say, and I think yeah, it's given me a lot to think about. I think at first I was like, okay, I think education, like college is like one size fits all. Everyone just needs to go. But I think hearing more about what you have to say, I think we all really do start from different places. And I think some people, it really isn't a good fit. And I think, again, I think a lot of it has to do with our education system. And um, yeah, so
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And yeah, one thing I'm coming away from thinking, I mean, I'm very interested in everything that you said, and it's definitely altered my opinion of college. But one thing I'm really strongly thinking about coming off this dialogue is it would be so nice if there were more Celias in the world. Seriously, because you have a healthy attitude and you want to contribute, and I think more of that will get us where we collectively need to go and lead to greater happiness. So it's nice that you have been able to develop into who you are, and I want that for more people.
thank you so much. It was, yeah, great conversation.